So, if a common question is, how do I overcome the feeling of the routine nature of Salah and the fact that I'm struggling with maintaining a high level of concentration and focus throughout, throughout prayers, or I suppose, from one prayer to the next? Yes, no doubt, to a certain degree, uh, a certain degree of volatility, some ups and downs. Sometimes we're more focused, more concentrating, other times less so. To a certain degree, that fluctuation is understandable and is part and parcel of being a human being. But our job as human beings, in broad terms, is to converge or bring all aspects of our life as much as possible to be a reflection of this core statement, La ilaha illallah, that there is no God but God, which means that there is none worthy of my commitment, devotion, except for God. Now, the thing is that we can all think of things in our lives that do preoccupy us, that do take our focus, that we have no problems concentrating, on in terms of our engagement with them, or with with whether it's with other people or with certain processes. We can all think of things where we are able to focus and we are able to concentrate. For many of us, the fact of the matter is that Salah is actually the one of the engagements or meetings or activities or practices where we struggle more or disproportionately struggle relative to other things. So I think way for us to think about this for ourselves as individuals is to think about this in comparative terms. Like, if I know that I am able as a human being to focus and to concentrate on certain things, what is it about the Salah that's preventing me from being able to do so? Then we may say, well, it's because of the invisible nature of who we are engaging with. Yeah. And this then begs the question of, well, yes, invisible in one sense, but on the other hand, visible in every way, from the point of view that the works of God or the acts of God, the things that Allah is doing, and I suppose even saying, meaning as a result of his commands and his orders, are constantly going on and all around us. And so, what the Salah challenges us to do is to try to see everything through the lens of God-centeredness, through what I call sometimes the God filter, basically. So you have the ability to actually experience not just your prayer, but all aspects of your life in a way that you are mindful of your need and your contingency and your dependence, and your interaction with God at all times. So sometimes when it comes to an individual prayer, if, for example, you're feeling that sense of repetition, okay, which then as a result leads to a sense of boredom, which as a result leads to a lack of concentration and focus and right engagement in the prayer. The thing is that there are two things I think fundamentally can help with this. Number one is to bring yourself to a state of mind, which we should ideally be striving for, just generally speaking anyway, and the Salah helps us with that, is to achieve a state of mind where you are not taking your next Salah for granted, because none of us have any guarantee about how long we're going to live. And whereas sometimes deep down, we or in our sort of subconscious, we work on some assumption that we're going to be around for for a long time, maybe even forever. I mean, that's how we act and behave sometimes. The truth of the matter is that our opportunities are indeed very limited. And so there is the notion of, again, as per the prophetic advice, of praying the farewell prayer. Imagine that this is it. This is the last one. There's not going to be any more after this one or after today. In fact, I was just thinking about, just as by way of a thought experiment, if you like, just imagine that your entry into paradise, would be determined on the basis of the average standard of your last 5 prayers, like as of now. So right now, so let's not worry about what you will do right in the future, but your last 5 prayers, the average standard of those last 5 prayers, let's say your last 5 obligatory prayers, what was that? And let's just imagine that that's the basis on which you will be admitted into paradise or not, or your deeds will be accepted or not. Now, when we think about it like that, it's that level. We'll say, okay, fine, but if I knew that this was going to be my last 5, then I would have changed. But then why? Because at some point you will have your last 5, but you don't know when that is. I mean, that might be right now. It might be tomorrow. It might be in a week. You don't know. And so there's something of it. The believer, the true believer, has an alertness and an urgency, right? That governs the way they live their entire lives. But certainly in the context of the salah, the same should be the case. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is then is that when, for example, as is currently about to happen, we are going into a winter period where during the afternoons the prayer times, for those in the northern hemisphere, the prayer times become compressed in the afternoon, and it's a big challenge for a lot of people. Dhuhr, Asr, and Maghrib comes fast, one after the other. And then again, it's exactly in this kind of time that we can experience this feeling of repetition, boredom, etc., etc. So let's just say only an hour and a half has passed since you prayed the last prayer. Now the time has come to pray again, and then you're feeling that. Again, one of the ways to bring yourself fully into the salah, in addition to what we've just discussed, is to think about what has taken place in the last 1.5 hours that then warrants in your mind or justifies, if you like, an extra 5-10 minutes of gratitude. Because really, when you put salah in perspective, it's actually not that much time. In fact, if you take all 5 prayers and you think about the average time that it takes for a person to pray their 5 prayers, you're talking no more than anywhere between 3 and 5% of someone's 24 hours, i.e., 3 and 5% of someone's life. So when you think about it like that, psychologically, people might think salah is taking up 10-20% of their time, but in truth, it's not. And so there's something about thinking about that last 1.5 hours and thinking about the number of breaths you've taken, the number of internal bodily processes that have taken place in order for you to just function and survive that 1.5 hours, right? The food you may have eaten, something you may have drunk, words you've been able to speak and say, the fact that you've been able to use your eyes. All of these things, that, to be honest with you, is enough. Right? Allah says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. That on earth there are signs for people of certainty, and in your own selves don't you see? So within ourselves, and Allah points to these various signs all over the Quran, that we have on our own bodies, within our own bodies, enough, and we experience enough, even if we may have some difficulties or we may have some health issues or difficulties, but we experience enough of blessings to warrant this extra kind of devotion and manifestation of commitment and thanks. And actually, finally, I'll add one more thing here, which is that we know that the story of the origin of the 5 prayers, of course, begins with 50. Begins with 50. Now imagine that. Just imagine that you had to pray 50 times in the day and night. Now, there's something of the wisdom perhaps of how this evolved, which was to send us a message, or for it to be clear to us that that's not too much. And actually it suggests that a human being in principle is capable of manifesting that kind of devotion. And it doesn't just suggest that, it almost gives this kind of emphasis to the idea that actually salah is the reason why we exist, actually, in some ways. Like the core thing that we are here to show that we can do on earth is prayer. That's what we're here to show that we can do, like the basis. Now, beyond that, there are maybe levels of then commitment and devotion that you go beyond the prayer in terms of how you show and manifest your relationship with your Lord. But fundamentally, we are, that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. Because, of course, if you do the calculations, 50 prayers, right, in a 24-hour period, so take out 6-7 hours for sleep, that's basically one every 20 minutes. So imagine now you're praying once every 20 minutes. Now, frankly, just reminding yourself about that might make you feel a bit more, relieved or calm about the fact that now you're praying all once, every couple of hours, for example, in an afternoon period where it's busy in that way. And of course, we know from the narration that Allah multiplies the rewards of those 5 into 50 for those who are committed and consistent in those 5. So I think this question really goes down to like what we find interesting or what we're motivated by in our lives very much depends on the extent to which we are clear about what our purpose in life is in the first place. And when we examine this issue deeply, although it's uncomfortable for us to admit this or confess this to ourselves, it is our disproportionate worldly attachment that actually is bringing the veil or the rust or whatever over our hearts, such that we feel this resistance to connect with the source of everything, if you like, I mean, that's what the salah is. It's almost like it's like an occasion where you tap into infinity. That's how I think about it sometimes, which is like this, it's like this transcendent kind of thing. You go into a zone which is just unlike any other kind of zone, if you like, that you can experience on Earth. Um, yeah, and I think so. I think I think a combination of these things and realizing that what Salah is, it's this micro manifestation of a meeting with your Lord. And I'll close this point with the following, which is, I suppose, a challenge to us, which is that you know, if we are unable to show or to move ourselves towards a position where we can show a consistent interest in being in Allah's company in our prayer, which is what the prayer is, then it's funny that we also say that we want paradise, because what I mean, to be in paradise is to be in Allah's company, for forever and ever and ever. So we're invited to be in his close proximity, in his company, in the prayer. And so actually, if it's our way of demonstrating our seriousness of actually wanting paradise, because wanting paradise is not just about desiring the material benefits of paradise or just about escaping hellfire, but actually the highest motivation is to be in the company of one's Lord and be in proximity to him, which is the true real motivation of the believer. And when you have that motivation, then your salah will become something different and something special, and something which then becomes, if you like, the central aspect of your day, of your life, as opposed to a sideshow, which sometimes we find convenient and sometimes we don't.